Good evening, DCC fans. Welcome back to the Scrivenery. This is our fall lineup. With me tonight is Ed Stanek, and my name is Trevor Stamper. We
Greetings.
also have some guests on. We've got Marlene Whitmer,
Hello.
a long-standing DCC devotee who's showed up on other podcasts like Order of the Shana. And we also have Todd Bunn. Todd is one of the co-hosts of D50 Shades of D&D, a wonderful little podcast that explores all the different variants of Dungeons and Dragons. And then also, he himself is a game store owner with over a decade's experience and quite a lot of experience with DCC and MCC directly, since that second game there was play tested in his store. Welcome, Marlene. Welcome, Todd. Ed, great to see you again.
Yeah, great to be back.
Yeah.
Great to be here.
It's been a wonderfully quick summer, unfortunately. It's just been a whirlwind tour, and I'm just now getting back from Gen Con and everything. It's been super busy. How about you, Ed?
Yeah, two cons over the summer. I had a great time with both of them, and it's just good to be back here and getting in some more episodes for the publishing community.
Yeah, absolutely. So what we've got set up for tonight's episode is, and the reason why we brought on Marlene and Todd is we wanted to talk to consumers directly. What is it that you like about third-party products or third-party publishing for Goodman Games? And in a broader sense, what is it that you're looking for? What is it that appeals to you in a product? And perhaps what doesn't appeal to you in a product? What types of things do you tend to pass on, and the like? Ed and I did a little bit of kind of ad hoc research for this ahead of time on the DCC Rocks and the MCC Facebook pages. We put up a really brief little poll. There's about 7,500 people on those two groups. Now, obviously, there's probably quite a bit of overlap, so I'm betting there's about 6,000 independent individuals. We got a wonderful 29 responses in the week that we ran our poll, which I believe even for social science is a low. So, but we thought we got some interesting results anyway, and we thought we would use those as a kind of a framework moving forward. So, I mean, we could dive right into it. What did we learn, Ed?
So as Trevor said, we got 29 responses. Granted, this is a self-selecting sample, but we're not out to do a scientific research here. So first question we posed was asking people, do you buy third-party products? Because we weren't sure, maybe there's a certain segment of the DCC community that they just rather would stick with the official Goodman Games publications. And now again, might be that people who don't tend to buy them shied away from the poll, but we had 3/4 of our respondents said that they've bought numerous third-party products, and the other quarter said just a couple here and there. We posed, how would you rate the quality of the third-party products you've purchased? And was pleased to see that the majority of respondents, about 86%, said generally good with few exceptions. And then the remainder, about 14%, said middle of the road. Nobody said that they found them to be poor or unsatisfactory. So that was good to hear.
So, let's dive right in and talk to our guests about those things. When you think of third-party publishing and everything, and the products that you've bought or sold in the past, what is it that our guests actually think is a good highlight? What's a good low light? What are you looking for, Marlene? Why don't you start us off?
I really look for well-produced, quality products. I like it to feel like I'm getting my money's worth. I like it when it's not full of misspellings and grammar issues. Like, get it well edited. So as far as quality, that's where I stand with it. And I'm not opposed to a PDF now and again, but I like to have a a solid piece of work in my hands. I do prefer that.
Okay, excellent. So, I mean, do you have a format preference, like an A5 or a small format? Something like zine sized, or do you
I
like
don't
8.5?
necessarily. No, I don't necessarily have a preference. I do like the Tales from the Smoking Worm, for example. I love that the little zine size. That's really fun, and it fits better behind a screen
Yeah.
than the full size book. But at the same time, there's a place for a full size book, and I don't mind those either, as long as it's well done.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent.
Looking at Swordfish Islands and their Hot Springs book with a leatherette cover. I really love that.
And that was the full size kind of player. No, the player one was the smaller one, wasn't it?
Yeah, the player one is a smaller one. The full size Dark of Hot Springs Island is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a beautiful product. And then they replaced it with a really nice piece of art for the second printing.
Yep.
So if you missed the leatherette cover, yeah. So those are really interesting perks, right? Leatherette covers, really nice printing and binding and everything. Those things can be pricey.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, and especially on a small press run, they can be really, cost inefficient is what I would put it at. But I mean, they're kind of what make them special in a way. Yeah. Todd, how about you?
So as a retailer, I always like that professional quality look. It always sold better. But from my standpoint, if I'm buying it for my own use, I guess I learned after years of avoiding Judges Guild because of poor quality that there can be great content in poor quality. So I would not avoid something just because it's poor quality, because there can be gems in there.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Not every fanzine can look like, Tales from the Smoking Worm. So
well, thanks, guys. I appreciate the love. We do work hard at it. So and it takes a village.
And Marlene mentioned PDFs. If something is PDF only, I tend to almost have zero interest in it. But anytime there's a PDF available and a hard copy, I always find the PDF as a great perk.
Absolutely.
But if that's all that's available, I'll move on to something else. It's not like in the modern era there's any shortage on stuff that we as gamers can buy. And I play an inordinate amount of games. So if I'm looking at DCC stuff and it's something and it doesn't have, a hard copy, I just move on to something else.
I'd have to say, Todd, I'm in the same camp. While I do find PDFs useful, for instance, to Gen Con, I took my my large iPad with the DCC and the MCC rulebook on it and hundreds of other titles. Not that I needed all of that, but I had it there at the touch of a button when I needed it in a remote location without having to lug around, two big rule books and everything. And that lightens your load at a place like Gen Con, where I'm routinely getting in 20 to 25,000 steps in a day.
Yeah.
Carry it, those big tomes can weigh you down, but having that PDF option makes it lighter and easier to work with.
Especially if you're like in a boring meeting at work.
That's true. They can't even see it, right?
Yeah. Outstanding.
And Trevor, I've seen your bookshelves, so I already knew your stance on that.
It's true. You don't see them here. I don't actually display them on the show, but yeah, I unfortunately, for my wife's point of view, am a physical book collector. So there's quite a collection there.
Not me.
So Trevor, what did people say in terms of the types of products that they like to see and like to buy?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, Ed. So as a matter of fact, we gave them in this question, you could answer multiple things, right? And so about 65% of people wanted to see adventure modules, and they specifically highlighted, they wanted to see funnels. Okay, and I think that's an interesting point, because if I'd done a series of polls about 2 years ago on the DCC Rocks group. Again, these are informal voluntary polls. But what I found was that 80 to 90% of DCC play seems to be focused at third level or lower. And then of that, about 80% is first or second level or funnel. And so the vast majority of people who are playing DCC appear to be playing it in this lower tier, right? And so that should be expected, that we're seeing 65% of people saying they want adventures, but they really do want funnels because they're looking for ways to get into games or get other people into games. And then we also saw 76% of respondents told us, hey, we want leveled adventures. So we want something beyond a funnel. So that seems to be a highly popular choice as well. Why don't we just talk about adventures, and we'll move on to the rest of them here in a couple of minutes. But Marlene,
Yeah.
how do you feel? Are you looking for primarily for adventures, or is that something that hits your eye quite a bit?
I go back and forth. I do really like finding new leveled adventures. And matter of fact, Joan Troyer and I have recently written one for Umerica, which is a 5th level, which
Nice.
look for that soon. That should be dropping hopefully very soon. And I do find that when I reach higher levels as a judge, I tend to do more sandbox play rather than adventures. So that's kind of give or take. I'm jumping a little bit ahead of myself, but one of the questions is about whether you just kind of pick and choose, and I do that whether it's with third-party publisher stuff or with the Goodman Games stuff. I've at this point in my judging career, I guess, I'm very much more pick what I like and leave the rest kind of behind, and maybe the rest will come back in another adventure. But yeah, it's gonna see where it takes me.
Yeah, I totally understand that viewpoint too, because you maybe want an adventure, and but adventures don't always strike me as directly relevant to what I want to run at a moment. But maybe 75% of it's useful, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I like having an adventure that is already written out. If you want to run it at a con, that is really helpful to have. If you're running in a campaign, the adventure might not fit. It might take a lot of wiggling to fit it in. So it depends on what you're doing with it. But
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, that pulls in something that we gave a general comment section in the poll, and there was at least one comment saying that people were looking for things that didn't have the baggage of and let me just quote it here. It was adventures and variant rule packages that can be dropped into a campaign without needing to accommodate any baggage from the writer's specific campaign setting, right? And so I totally understand that, because I am not a person who traditionally uses modules or adventures. I would steal a map, maybe I'd steal a monster, that would be it. I would run completely sandbox and freestyle and freeform and just let it go wherever it goes.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to use one of those, and as I've become busier in my work life, in the past decade or so, I've found that they're a good crutch. But when they're heavily burdened with other people's connections to other things, that actually is a detriment to me personally. Maybe not to others. How about you, Todd? What do you think?
So I buy like every Goodman Games adventure that comes out,
Sure.
but there's a certain style and a certain sameness to the size and scope of each one. And it takes each Goodman Games module is usually a good solid 8 hours worth of adventure. You can push it a little quicker, or you can stretch it out a little more. So when I look for other adventures, if I'm going third party, I look for shorter or longer adventures. Like you mentioned America, like the Mall. It seems like I could squeeze that in a little quicker than a typical Goodman Games module, because I think it was in A Crawling Under the Broken Moon?
I think it was, yeah.
So I like the ones that you can squeeze in quickly or that you can stretch out for a long time. Like I know some of Daniel Vance's adventures, you could
Yeah.
play every day for a week to get through them.
Yeah, and some of
Especially the
them.
one that's not out yet.
That's right. Daniel, you've been warned. It can't
That's
really
right.
go over 400 pages. I mean, then
Right, right,
it's too big.
right.
Yeah, no, I
And
agree
then
with you too.
I'll tell you right now, I have been funneled out after 10 years of heavy DCC play and running, playing in funnels at every convention and running funnels every free RPG day and every DCC day. If I were to start up a DCC campaign today, right now, I would skip the funnel as long as I had players that had played funnels before. I think everyone should play a funnel or two or three or five. I don't know. I passed that up a long time ago. But if you stop playing DCC before a third level and you don't go on past that, you're missing a lot of great stuff. There's so much great stuff in there. So I like the high level adventures as well.
I think that I want to second. I've heard a number of people that I've talked to at conventions, for example, who have said that while they enjoy the funnel experience, there seems to be there. I guess there's two camps. There's certainly people within the Goodman Games DCC camp who really love the uniqueness of the funnel experience. Then I think there's also another camp that is, yeah, but there's more to the game than that. And I think that especially, in my opinion, if you're looking to introduce someone new to the game, I think that a leveled adventure actually shows off more of the gonzo-ness of the features of the game, like for example, mighty deeds, spell burn, these things that you don't encounter at in a zero level setting, or the way that spell casting works with the roll for success. And I think that it's important that we have that option for people too, because I think that's a great way to introduce people to some of the things that really make DCC different.
I totally agree with you. As a matter of fact, if I could share a short little anecdote, we were prepping to run to produce Smoking Worm Monograph Volume 1, Issue 2, The Hangman's Garden. Dieter Zimmerman wrote it, and he'd been playing that at cons for about 10 years, about a dozen years now. And one of the things I don't know, I'd read the module, I'd worked through it and everything, and I'd done some light editing on it, and we'd gotten it ready, and I was laying it out, and it suddenly occurred to me that this was not a funnel. It was it was a second level adventure, as a matter of fact. And the reason why that came up was we were gonna run a test at Gen Con last year, and we were gonna run it at Gen Con, and we needed to pre-gen some characters. And I hadn't even thought about the level for the module, but I asked Dieter about it. I was like, well, why is it that at the very beginning, he'd been running this since 2012. At the very beginning of DCC, you produced a second level module and not a funnel. And even though it's got kind of a funnel-esque aspect to it, it could be run as a funnel. Dieter was really, really succinct. He said, it doesn't allow, just like Ed said, it doesn't allow you to showcase any of the mighty deeds, the spell casting, or disapproval and stuff like this. He's like none of the classes get showcased in funnels, and where at the time everybody was running funnels, he chose to create a second level adventure specifically so it could showcase that. And so yeah, it depends on what you're trying to get at, but zero level funnels aren't always the best introduction to the system. I would agree with that. So if we move on to some of the other areas, past adventures, 52% of people said they were interested in rules variants. 65% of people said they were interested in new rules or classes or monsters. That's actually a huge population. And 59% they were interested in reference tools. So things that you could use. I would assume that would be things like the book of tables and stuff like that. I can't tell you personally. I mean, I own 4 copies of the Book of Tables. I have one in my permanent, con bag. It never leaves it. And then I always have one on my desk, and I always have one on my gaming table, and then one on my shelf. And so I can totally see where that's a useful reference. And it saves me so much time flipping through the book, trying to figure out what page certain things are. On the other hand, I haven't memorized a lot of page reference spots in the book because I have a book of tables. And so, I don't know if it's a downside, but Todd, what do you think? Beyond adventures, what are the things you're looking for? What are the things that you found that the people who came into your store and were casually looking to pick up things for DCC were looking for?
So just like I mentioned for the adventures, there's certain stuff that Goodman doesn't really do. They don't add character classes. They don't give you big books of equipment. They don't give you, they mostly give you adventures.
Yeah.
Great adventures. But Crawl magazine was always popular. It would have new classes. The issue with firearms would go like crazy. So anything with those kind of resources, Jim Wampler's Scientific Barbarian, check this artifact and stuff like that. Those appeal to me. And yeah. So I guess I just looking for things that Goodman themselves don't put out, because if it's just adventures like Goodman is putting out, I have 100 Dungeon Crawl Classics adventure modules, but like the Scientific Barbarian stuff, the Crawl stuff, Tales of the Smoking Worm, actually the America stuff is actually my all-time favorite stuff.
Sure.
I absolutely love that. Reed, he must never sleep either. So
yeah, I would agree.
I love it as an alternate setting, and just there's so much stuff out for it, that lots of resources. It's great. So I love that. Something that will take my DCC game to a different place is what I want from a third-party publisher.
Okay, Marlene, how about you?
Yeah, the new rules classes monsters, that's big for me. I like anything that kind of deviates from the average Appendix N gaming. The matter of fact, the home campaign that I'm running right now, we have pulled in just a little bit of this and a little bit of that from a bunch of other. At this point, it's mostly DCC with a dash of MCC, smattering of actually Ed's what's the one, the underwater thing,
Mare Nostrum.
Yeah. I pulled in some of that just to get the good monsters. We're doing a little bit of traveling on the open seas and getting those good monsters and taking them to underwater caverns and things like that. And it's been a really fun change from just the kind of sword and sorcery kind of thing. So that's been a lot of fun. And so that's kind of what I do. I like new skins for old monsters. It's one of the things that I really like about system neutral campaign settings as well, is being able to just grab the bestiary in the back of the core book and reskin something that's system neutral and find some new interest there instead of the same kobolds and goblins and that sort of thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Ed, what about you? Do you have any preferences?
I think what Marlene just said about the new and different variation, to me, that's a really big deal. I started playing D&D in 1980 and reached a point where I had everything memorized. I could tell you what every monster was. Not that I set out to do it.
Yeah.
But I could tell you what every monster was, or whatever magic item did, and it took a lot of fun out of the game because there was no longer mystery to it.
Mhm.
DCC has given me back that sense of mystery because things are unpredictable. And one of the ways in which those things are unpredictable is this things like monster variants. The fact that, it's not, you almost expect for a DCC monster to be non-standard, so to speak. You expect to be to not really know what's going to go on with it, and the fact that there's not standard magic items and so forth,
Mhm.
and so supplements that provide some alternate twist kind of stuff, to me, I feel like that makes things very fun and very interesting, and we talk, one of our things later on talks about using material straight or just picking pieces from it.
Mhm.
But certainly some of those variant stuff, well, like you talked about, Marlene, taking some of the water related stuff,
Mhm.
that's great. I mean, take bits and pieces and like a magic item here, a monster
Mhm.
there, and pull those into whatever you want to be doing. And I think that adds so much dynamicness and makes the game unpredictable and mysterious again. And that, I think that's fabulous.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. As a matter of fact, while you were saying what you just said, I was thinking of the different, for instance, the different monsters we've created for Smoking Worm and stuff, and I've written the vast majority of those myself. And one of the things that really appeals to me in Dungeon Crawl Classics, and that I look for in third-party products and actually rarely find, is a lot of subtables for a given monster.
Mhm.
If a monster has a straight stat block and it maybe has one or two special abilities,
Yeah.
like you said, I left Dungeons and Dragons, Ed, like you, because I could stand at the table and I'd be like, okay, you're walking in, you're in a town and this is going on and that's going on, and you see three of this that look like this, and my players knew exactly what they were fighting, and if I tweaked it, I would get pushback from them
Right.
because
That's
it
not
was.
what that does. That's not what that is.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
exactly right. Yeah,
Yeah.
and that became very. It was just an unhappy situation, right? Because
Mhm.
you felt like you weren't given permission in those types of systems. As much as I love third edition, you weren't. I felt like I wasn't given permission to tweak things. I could
Mhm.
create new things whole cloth, but if I tweaked it, then I
Mhm.
had a whole bunch of irate players because they expected to do X, Y, and Z like it was a board game.
Right.
And so when I look for monsters, when I write them, I am very specifically saying, there's a lot of variation in nature, and I'm going to represent that. And maybe I'm going to represent that in a table of different powers, or maybe I'm going to represent that in, like I really love the way they built the dragon in the core rulebook with lots of age categories and special
Mhm.
abilities, things
Mhm.
that can really dynamically shift
Yeah.
from one category to the next, but it's still a dragon, right?
Right.
And so you are never certain. You're certain it's a dragon, but you don't know what it can do
What
for you.
about it? Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
make a point of in all of my setting books to have classes and monsters that are new and add to the flavor of that
Mhm.
context.
yeah, exactly. And so I really look for that in third party publishers. I don't find it very often. Um, Unnatural Selections by Luau Lu, which is an MCC compendium of monsters and everything, had some of that. I was really happy to see some of the subtables and everything, so that things had room to grow and be adaptable and different.
Mhm.
Um, and the other thing that it does, by the way, is it means that monster. I know that Dungeon Crawl Classics is not a. It's not a balanced game. I don't expect it to be balanced. I don't even expect classes to be balanced, right? I certainly don't expect bad guys, adversaries, and everything to be balanced. But it means that because if you've got that spread of capabilities, that adversary becomes useful at low level and at medium level and at high level.
Mhm.
And so if you think about it, the replayability of that monster is much higher on a creature that has a couple of tables associated with it
Mhm.
in terms of strength of powers, or you know spread of hit dice or things like that. Yeah, at least that's my thought on monsters, and I'm always looking for monsters. So
Mhm.
yeah. So
So
Ed,
we had
go ahead.
Okay, so I was going to go on to we had one. We don't need to dig too much in this one, but we asked people, how do you expect third-party products to compare price-wise? And most people, 69% said about the same as Goodman Games products. 24% said, well, we might expect it to be higher because you don't have the economy of scale. You're not printing as many copies, and so therefore some of your costs are going to be harder to cover, so it might be a little bit more expensive. And only 7% said they expected the price to be lower because it lacks the brand name power and characteristics of Goodman Games products.
Yeah, I actually think that is worth dwelling on for just a second.
Sure.
First of all, I think for third-party publishers, which is our largest audience here, this means that being new to the game isn't going to hinder you in terms of price, right? This means that you don't have to lowball yourself and just get it out there and squeak by or maybe lose some money. This means that you should be really thinking about your pricing system and making sure that you are producing a product that is priced at a representation of the amount of effort that goes into it. And I think that's really important to think about as a third-party publisher. It also means that there is at least a percentage of the population that is understanding of the concept of scale and cost in third-party publishing. Let me just give you an example. This is Smoking Worm monograph number 1, For Whom the Bell Trolls. This is the risograph print edition with actually a fold-out flap that's been glued down and then has a place to put cards and everything for this one, so that all the monsters have images and stuff. This type of product price point, sold at $22 initially. It's what I still sell it for. It comes with 17 cards. You can't match that. I'm not selling that. I'm selling that at below what it should be priced at, right? Unless I was selling like 5 or 10,000 of these, and I could really get economy of scale in. And that's why a lot of the handwork has to happen, because it's like there's no way I could make the sleeves at the economy of scale I'm working at unless I made them myself, right? And so you need to, that's something that hopefully that consumers think about. They don't always, but it certainly as a third-party publisher, you should be considering these things. How much time is it going to take me to make this, or add this thing that I want to add? What's the payoff in terms of usefulness for the player, but also how much does that increase the price? Ed, at some point we should maybe have an entire episode about
pricing.
I
think that's a good call.
Frankly, it's an awkward topic, right?
Right. I'll put it on the list.
But I think maybe we should think about it and try and sensitively approach it. Todd, do you have any thoughts?
Well, I think in the general scope of things, I think a lot of Goodman Games fans realize that Goodman's prices are actually on the lower end.
Yeah.
For what you're getting. If you compare a $40 DCC core book to any D&D book put out in the last decade, most new core games for other systems, $59.95 is the starting point.
And if you're talking D&D, you're talking 3 books.
Yeah.
Right.
3 core books to get started, whereas DCC is the one. So there's also that issue. You buy 3 D&D core books, and you're talking what, $100 or so, or more there, $150.
Yeah.
160. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah.
And then $10 adventures.
Right.
And tons of free resources online. With companies like the Purple Sorcerer and stuff like that. But you're getting way more for your buck with Goodman Games to begin with. And I think a lot of fans realize that the third party publishers are going to have to sell it for a little higher than that. I didn't usually see people flinch at an adventure module that was $12 or $13. They may only buy 3 instead of 5 at one given time, but they'll still they'll still grab them.
Yeah.
And
I remember when I was
I'm-
buying first edition AD&D modules, they were $12 to $15, and that was how many years ago? Decades ago.
That was
So
the
if you're
late
so-
80s.
Right.
Yeah.
So if you're selling a module now for $15, you're still getting a good deal.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah, absolutely.
when I first started doing eBay stuff, I was picking up copies of Tomb of Horrors for like $5, and that included the shipping.
Oh,
Yeah, you can't find it like that now. Marlene, do you have anything you'd like to chip in on this, or?
No, nothing that I've not really touched on already. Like there's such a huge variation in the different products, because when you're looking at, say, Tales from the Smoking Worm, which is gorgeous, and then
Thank you.
yeah, and then something else like Gong Farmer's Almanac, which is well published, but it's not quite as, when it's just the little, instead of the big hardcover, when it's just the little editions, it's not quite as, it's well put together, but it's slightly lower quality paper and that sort of thing. And me personally, I'm willing to pay for the higher quality, but I certainly understand the lower quality and that money has to be made a little bit, and I get that too. So either way,
Yeah,
I'm happy, as long as it's good content.
And that's really what's important. And you're right. I mean, the Gong Farmer's Almanac, which, by the way, is available online for free.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
The PDFs are free, and
Yeah.
there's what, 3,000 pages of content now, zine content from Gong Farmer's Almanac. Probably 24 adventures, 24 or more classes, thousands of magic items and stuff, right? I mean, so the amount of material there is just staggering.
Mm-hmm.
But to buy it in hardback, nicely, now it is in hardback because it sits better and everything. It's a little bit better product. But you go find those saddle stitch stapled ones. I just folded my Gen Con ones and put them away. And they're they're actually they hew very closely to the punk aesthetic of handmade, hand built, and everything and stuff. And so that's useful. Let's move on to implementation. 86% of our users say, man, they really like to use third-party products directly, right? So meaning they're going to buy a product, they're going to use it for what it was intended, or use the whole thing for what it's intended and everything. Whereas about 59% of our folks say, yeah, and there's an overlap because they could choose both. They're more than willing to take it and cannibalize it for what they want. And frankly, I kind of feel like that reflects any gaming product, right? As Todd knows, we own gaming libraries because they're reference collections. And everything. And there's not many days when I don't go pull something that was published 35, 40 years ago and look at it specifically for a piece of information, not for what it was intended. But what do you guys think? Do you generally agree with that? I mean, most of the time you're using something as it was intended, and some of the time you're cannibalizing it, or are you feeling opposite to that?
I'd say at this point I cannibalize more than I use as intended. But there is still the odd adventure or campaign setting that I'll, let's do this, and go through it whole cloth. And it varies so much for me. But
Todd?
Yeah, so from spending years running, I don't know, as many as 5 and 6 different campaigns every 2 weeks, I always start with published modules. Just because I was running so much, there's no way I could sit down and dedicate. But I always have that base, but I never stick to it. It's almost like a guidebook. And at any given time, I will pull rooms or monsters or characters out of everywhere and throw them in. I will run an adventure and actually use a map from a different book. And DCC is not only no exception, but it's even more likely to happen, if I'm running old school D&D or DCC, I'm more likely to have a hodgepodge of materials with me to get me through the night.
It just seems so adaptable like that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I want to make a real quick comment for the sake of just for the publishers to digest. If anyone might be inclined to be put off by the fact that someone's going to buy your product just to pull off a couple bits and pieces, don't be. If anything, I would consider that flattering. Okay, even though you're not going to use you're not planning to use my thing, you still found it interesting enough that you're going to get it so that you can use these couple components of it that seemed intriguing enough for you. I find that flattering. Yeah, don't be upset. I don't know if anyone would be, but yeah, I would caution you. Don't be bothered by the fact that someone's not going to use your whole thing.
Yeah, I would completely agree with you on that, Ed. As a matter of fact, I've very rarely ever used anything as intended or whole cloth.
Well, half the time the players don't go the direction you expect them to anyway.
Only half.
Completely
all the time. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I totally agree. And so, I believe very fundamentally in player-driven campaigns and games. I'm putting something out there for them, and I'm waiting for them to respond. And if they're going to go to the right instead of the left, which is how the adventure is supposed to run, then I'm just going to go to the right as well, and I'll figure it out. Either another way to get me back to the left, or we'll go somewhere else completely different. And so, it's what players, what people who buy your products do with your products is probably fascinating to know, but not really relevant at some level, right? It's just, like you said, flattering that it got used.
Right.
I'm just jazzed that someone's paying attention.
Right, exactly.
So
it came up on their radar, even though they're not going to do in my case, for example, a fantasy Rome setting,
Yeah, absolutely. So, that maybe talks about the next question, what catches your eye, whether you follow someone specifically or whether you only follow your interests. Ed, do you want to cover that?
Yeah. I'd like to just touch on this one quick, because then I'd like to get to the list of the free text comments we gave.
I agree.
Yeah. So the question was, do you follow specific third-party publishers? And about a quarter said, yeah, I follow specific ones. About a quarter said, I just see whatever comes attracts my fancy. And some people said that they do both of those. So I did not specifically ask anyone to name what publishers they follow. That might have been interesting, but yeah, I think it's I think that one thing that you can take away from that is you don't need to have devotees for your product in order to be successful. But we have a decent number of free text comments where we said, hey, what would you like to see more of? And so I think it'd be very insightful to go through some of these and see what our guests think of those.
Oh, absolutely. Let's start off with higher level adventures. What do you think, Marlene?
Hey, absolutely. When I mentioned the Umerica module that Joan and I wrote, I failed to mention the name of it, which is the Blackest Friday. Watch for it soon. It's a 5th level.
5th level. Okay.
Nice.
So yeah, I mean, if you look, the highest published adventure from Goodman Games is 7th level, if I remember correctly.
Really?
I think there is one 7th level module. Yeah.
Nice.
I don't think it's a big one, but I've never actually, my group is at 5th and 6th, so we're kind of edging our way up there. Todd, how about you?
Yeah, so I think people that have played the game, instead of setting aside a night for a one shot of another funnel, grab a 5th level adventure. So DCC at 0 level is a completely different game than 1st and 2nd level DCC, which is a completely different game at 3rd and 4th level.
Yep.
And then at 5th level,
The Gonzo goes off the chart.
It just goes crazy.
Hmm.
And so you're really selling yourself short if you don't do it. And maybe if you would play a 5th or 6th level DCC adventure, you would realize it is worth pushing our campaign along for that long.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, because I definitely believe, Todd, that there is a difference between jumping on Purple Sorcerer and pre-generating a 5th level character or a 7th level character than running that character up to 5th level.
Right.
Getting the corruptions and so forth and the history, spending that luck down. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, there is, not only that, but living in that character's shoes and knowing inherently what that character will do or should do at a given moment.
Hmm.
Your ability to just empathically work with that character is far better than if you just picked up a sheet and ran with it.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
It is, after all, a role-playing game.
It's a role-playing game.
Right.
Yeah.
So we talked.
Go ahead.
So we talked already briefly about the notion of what somebody said: adventures and rules packages that can be dropped into a campaign without needing to accommodate the baggage of the writer's specific campaign setting. We talked a bit about that. Someone said setting source books. One person said they wanted to see something analogous to the birthright setting.
Yeah,
that's interesting. So if someone out there has an itch to do something like that, there were some people who said they want to see more patrons. Genre mashups was something that someone mentioned. And I think as you see the general trend here, we kind of already spoke to this. It's new and interesting things that take the game interesting directions. That's certainly one of the things that we're seeing as a common theme, I think.
Yeah, I mean, we see things like someone wrote in they'd like to see Gritty or Gonzo, and the very next person, the one who was the most loquacious, said they like things that are different, right? They don't need generic fantasy DCC stuff. There's a lot of that, and I agree with Todd's comment that DCC in the mainstream has got some really great adventures, but when you look at it as a whole, after you've played through 20 or 30 of them, you're looking for something to do that's different. Starcrawl and Umerica, this person said, are great examples of third-party publishers taking DCC into a new direction. Examples this person would like to see would be planetary romance, retro sci-fi, time travel adventures, underwater adventures. PCs are insects exploring a big hive dungeon, for instance. Good, unique adventures and modules with rules to facilitate them are what they're looking for. Todd, how do you feel about that statement?
So I feel like we can all do all that ourselves. There's enough third-party products out there right now that we can do time travel DCC. Yeah. I mean, we have Mutant Crawl Classics, we have America, we have Weird Frontiers. Take it and run with it. There doesn't need to be a third-party product for everything. Mash it up yourself, which is what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
Right. Well, folks, I'm afraid that we've got running up against the next show here that we're going to have to make way for. So we'd like to thank our guests for coming on and joining us for this discussion. And we hope that the publishers out there gained some thoughts of where you can take your product directions.
Yeah. Marlene, thanks for coming on. Todd, thanks for coming on and
thanks for having me.
Work a little bit early to make it. Really appreciate that. Elena, as always, thanks for your help and guidance in making us broadcast.
Absolutely.
Those are things I don't know how to do. She's our own personal Stratus fiend.
All right. Good night, folks.
Good night, folks. We'll be back in 2 weeks.
Good night.